Have you ever witnessed a family member or even a friend suffer from being terminally ill? It can be ranged from Alzheimer's to cancer. These both, along with much more, are incurable diseases. An incurable disease is that no matter the treatment, you will be forced to live with it for the rest of your life. Having no cure to these diseases leads patients to suffering and pain, which brings me into euthanasia. Euthanasia is the practice of intentionally ending a person's life to relieve pain or suffering. In most places, this practice is very illegal. Only 2 states in the whole U.S. allow doctors to practice this. My question to you is, should euthanasia be legalized universally and be considered ethical? Euthanasia is not immoral. For something to be considered immoral, it would have to violate norms. This is an argument that it is immoral because people believe that life must be protected. Euthanasia can be broken into a few categories. Passive and active euthanasia. Passive euthanasia is when you take someone who is on life support off of it and wait for them to die naturally, or if they decide to not take extraordinary measures at all. Active euthanasia is when a doctor gives a patient a prescription of medication. It is most commonly done by lethal injection, but some doctors administer a patient on how to do a drug. Euthanasia was originally invented as a courtesy to end pain and suffering. Studies have shown that most doctors abuse their power simply because it costs more to keep a patient alive. Do we really value human life so little? There are multiple aspects to euthanasia, religion being a huge one. Most religions say that it is never acceptable to take a life regardless of the reason, and that it is considered sinful in the eyes of God. Religion believes that God is the creator of life, therefore he should be the one who decides when it's over. Euthanasia can be broken down into a few more categories. Voluntary, involuntary, or non-voluntary euthanasia. Voluntary euthanasia is when the patient chooses life or death himself. Non-voluntary euthanasia is when the patient is unable to make the decision for themselves, so someone else does it for them. Involuntary euthanasia is when the doctor suggests and tries to convince the patient to be euthanized against their will. Justifying euthanasia is a question of showing that allowing people to have a good death whenever they choose will make them happier than the pain that they are going through. The way that euthanasia should be seen is that it should be the patient's right to decide if they want to die with dignity. It should be the patient's decision if they want to live or die, regardless of what doctors and families think. People do not truly understand what a terminally ill patient goes through day in and day out. It truly takes a toll on a person's body. Euthanasia protects human dignity. If a person is living in constant pain to the point they no longer would like to live, over time, a person will eventually lose sight of their self. People would rather starve than to live with extreme pain. Seems a bit far-fetched, right? Without euthanasia, the quality of life will deteriorate. All in all, euthanasia will always be up for debate. There are too many factors and obstacles that go into this to even consider settling it. Euthanasia can be a very good thing, but there will always be a handful of people who will find negative in a potentially positive thing. Yes, euthanasia can expose vulnerable people to end their life, but who's to say that they do not get to make that decision for themselves? Euthanasia should be legalized universally, but the patient should have to discuss it with their doctor first beforehand.